We're talking Cleveland Browns on the Our Lads Football Network, Our Lads Football YouTube channel. Thanks for tuning in as always. We've got ourselves a good show for you because besides our regular look into an NFL team's offseason, we also have some big stories that have just come out of this specific team, the Browns, of course, not just Deshaun Watson news, but also everybody's talking about Myles Garrett. So great timing to bring in our Cleveland Browns insider, Fred Greetham from the Orange and Brown Report. Thanks for doing this, Fred. Good talking to you once again at this busy time of year.
Oh, yeah. Free agency. We're on the doorstep. Busy writing what could happen, what couldn't happen. Restructuring contracts, which they're always doing, just did it again. And so, yeah, there's always something going on, especially with the Browns. Seems like they're always in the news a lot of times for the bad side of things. Just when you thought you were coming out of the tunnel on Deshaun Watson, where they had, even though they have him under contract and so forth, financially, they were moving on from him. And it looked like, okay, you hit bottom. Now you kind of get going with the 2 pick. And then Myles Garrett drops his bombshell, which just kind of threw everything into chaos, at least nationally and outside of Cleveland. And there's uncertainty all the way around. So always something to talk about, Greg, for sure.
That's what you're looking for, but it would be nice on the other side. It doesn't always have to be bad. By the way, before we get started, just want to remind everybody about the Our Draft Guide. This is going to be available on your doorstep April the 7th, 8th, right around there. We're going to be mailing them out. So we have a link in the description. You can check that out. You can order the draft guide. Best time of year to do so. And we've got all of if you're a relevant college football player coming into the NFL draft, we have a scouting report on you in the draft guide. So check that out, including, of course, you can also order the Arled's Insider if you like to scroll through the depth charts, including the Cleveland Browns, and not to deal with ads. That's one of the great assets to having the Arled's Insider. Also in the description, as is how to find out about the Cleveland Browns through the Orange and Browns Report. And Fred Greetham, either on the air or with his articles. So let's get started with those 2 big topics then, Fred. First of all, Myles Garrett, I will say this, as a fan of the rest of the league, when I heard that, and I'm not saying this is accurate, but when I heard that the Browns might be thinking of trading Myles Garrett to the Eagles, or the Eagles were interested or whatever, myself and the rest of the league just we all put out a collective sigh of no way. I mean, please don't even think of doing that. If you're going to trade Myles Garrett, do not trade him to the Super Bowl champions. That is not what the rest of the league wants to see happening. So what is really going on with Myles Garrett, and what do you think is going to happen?
Well, I mean, first off, who wouldn't want to have Myles Garrett? Okay.
Everybody.
So what this has created buzz all around the NFL, 31 teams, that's all they're talking about. Oh, he could be the piece to get us there and so forth. The reality is I will be very surprised if the Browns change their mind and trade him. I think it was a very selfish move by him. He's under contract for 2 more years. He knows that the Browns really can't trade him without incurring $36 million in dead cap. Okay. Now they restructured Deshaun Watson today, and that freed up $36 million. So they were still over the cap $23 million. So they're now compliant. Okay. But in order to acquiesce Myles Garrett, they would have to cut 2 or 3 starters or restructure. They've already done Watson. So they'd have to restructure several other players to the fullest just to get under the cap so they can let him do what he wants to do.
Yeah.
And, Greg, if they said, Myles, we're going to let you do whatever you want to do. You want to go to the Eagles? We'll make it happen. They would totally have no money at all to even try to compete in 25 free agency, let alone giving up your best player, your best defensive player of the year. So I understand he wants to go to the Super Bowl, but unless the Browns are just going to say, we're just going to forfeit the next 2 years
Yeah.
and sit out these 2 years,
Yeah.
they really can't financially do it. There is a way, if they made a move after June, it's still a big cap hit, but it's like half. They could spread it out. But still, now the draft's over. There's really nothing that can help you for this season unless you trade Garrett for maybe 2 or 3 really good players, starting players from another team that could help you this year. Yeah, if you get a draft picks for 2026, big deal. Everybody says, oh, it could be a good quarterback draft. Well, how does that help you compete this year? I've been through 131 playing to get the top pick in the draft. It doesn't work. They got Myles Garrett. They got a few good players, but they didn't get to the Super Bowl. And you ask, obviously these players want to get paid, but I bet you if you ask every player in the NFL, they want to get to the Super Bowl. Who doesn't?
Yeah.
Well, if you said, Myles, again, we'll let you go wherever you want, free agent, you pick the team. Maybe it'd be the Eagles. Maybe it'd be the Chiefs. But there's no guarantee you're going to make it to the Super Bowl or even win the Super Bowl because the way the NFL is set up. And, when you think about that, in the history, it was going to be such a big deal if the Chiefs won this year because it would have been the 3rd time in a row somebody won the Super Bowl. And even with the dynasties of the Patriots, nobody's, won the Super Bowl more than twice in a row. So you can't pick that destination. He has 2 years left on his contract. If he really is bound and determined to do this, play out your 2 years, become a free agent. You're 31, pick the very best team for the wherever you want to go. That's when players start chasing the Super Bowl, in my opinion. But he's 29. His leverage is to be unhappy, but is he going to just sit at home and miss out on his 29th, year season and his 30th year season, and which is his prime? So, the Browns have been, I think part of it was the Browns have acquiesced to guys in the past. If you remember Odell Beckham, he really torpedoed the Browns season. Right in the middle of the season, his dad put out a video and says, Baker Mayfield can't find OBJ, he's ruining him and so forth. The Browns didn't have to do anything because he was under contract and it was a big hit. They reconfigured and let him out and let him go to the Super Bowl by picking the Rams. Well, that's a difference between OBJ and Garrett. He's your best player, probably the best player in the defensive in the NFL today. I just don't know how that makes the Browns better.
And plus, caveat. And plus, if Garrett's trying to look at that as an example, and maybe that was something he remembered, the fact is, like you said, the contract just doesn't make sense. It made sense then for OBJ, does not make sense now. So it just, and I'm glad you spelled this out because you're so many people, so many fans that go about their days and they don't really pay too much attention unless say you are a Cleveland Browns fan. And they don't know. They just don't know the intricacies of these contracts and how it can affect teams and why it is not a realistic realization that the Browns would be making such a deal. So now that you've explained it this way, it makes no sense. I see no way, shape, or form that Myles Garrett will not be a Cleveland Brown this year. So
yeah, and just the last thing on that. The biggest problem they have, and I'm sure we'll talk about it, that they have to solve is because of the huge mistake with Deshaun Watson is finding a quarterback. And if your best player in your team is not a quarterback, you have to turn whatever, if you do somehow, some way, all things being equal, you moved Myles Garrett, you have to get a quarterback in the equation or it doesn't help you at all. And I use this analogy, might not be right, Greg, but if you ranked 1 to 32, the starting quarterbacks in the NFL, how far down that list would you have to go to trade Myles Garrett for a starting quarterback even up? Burrow Lamar
Yeah,
Jackson, Mahomes, Herbert. I don't know how far you'd go, but I
sure.
bet you it wouldn't be until at least in the 20th range where you would be able to say, we'll give you Myles Garrett, you give us your quarterback. And that quarterback probably wouldn't be in their 20s. They would probably be on the back end of their quarterback on their career. And that's what I'm saying. The quarterback trumps everything.
Yep.
And that's why, they went 3-14 with Myles Garrett. They went 0 or 1 in, I think they went 0-16 with Myles Garrett. He's very important, but you got to get the quarterback solved. And if
That's
he
right.
is your trade chip to get somebody in quarterback, and I don't buy getting a number 1 pick next year or whatever, because unless you've got the first pick, there's no guarantee you're going to get the Joe Burrow or, just, Justin
Look at the
Herbert
Bears
or
last
whoever.
year. It's not an exact science.
Yeah,
Anyway,
and with that said, if they're at number 2, if they're sold that Cam Ward's the only quarterback available, I don't that would be the only thing I'd say is trade Myles Garrett to get the number 1 pick and then take Cam Ward, and then you could take Abdul Carter too, and and make the most of it. But again, the financials don't add up in a trade.
yeah. Makes sense. And again, I'm glad that we got that through. So let's now move on to Deshaun Watson. And so the last time we spoke, you talked about the scenario of restructuring his contract. But the fact is that he was going to end up with the Browns on the sidelines, never playing another down unless some dramatic thing took place and there was no other option but to bring Deshaun Watson into the game. Is that still the case?
Yes. I mean, it's you don't want to say it for the player, but the injury was a blessing in disguise, because not so much the original injury, but the second injury that he just had, or the second surgery, because in effect, I don't see how he even recovers in time to play next year. They have to make all their plans around him anyway, even if he was playing great, which he didn't. They have to, because you don't know if he's going to come back at all before the end of the year. But if he misses all of next season, they can keep him on the physically unable to perform or injury reserve, and he gets his money, but he doesn't count against the roster. And it's my understanding with the insurance policy that would qualify the Browns to get almost the entire $46 million covered with insurance for injury. I think it was like $44 million.
Oh, okay.
That second injury, after that he had to have the recent repair, there was some speculation that he voided the contract completely, because if he did it, doing something he wasn't supposed to do, like he was out of a walking boot, which he was supposed to be in, and so forth. Andrew Berry, though, said that he didn't do anything nefarious, so they're not going after to void the contract. But by them restructuring, he got his $46 million up front, so that's the fourth of the 5 years. That's gone.
Okay.
They only owe him $46 million more next year. I mean,
Okay.
only. But it's the dead cap. They've kicked it out like 4 or 5 years.
Okay.
So they can manage it.
That's good.
So they're over the hump with. They've traded they've got everything paid for, but the $46 million. I don't ever expect him to play for the Browns again. But the point is, I think they're going to probably get most of his salary covered in insurance. And there is some, even compensation in the salary cap. I understand that if a guy misses the length of time, that you might get a credit back of 5-10 million or something. But they're under the cap now by 13 million. So they are, even with doing Watson, they're ready to go. I expect them to do some more moves here, but
okay.
Yeah, they're moving on from him. And with the number 2 pick, if they take a quarterback, that's their future. Yeah. It's a little bit unsettled if they think that there's a quarterback at number 2 that they would take if the other one is taken by another team.
Yeah. Before we get into that, I have to ask you, what were your feelings, especially since it's a Baltimore situation, it's in the division, you know the Ravens well. What was your first thought when you heard about Justin Tucker, considering everything that the Browns have been through with Deshaun Watson? What was your first thoughts about that, and what do you think about the whole situation now? Even though I know it's hard to understand because we don't know anything really except what we've heard and outside in the media. But what are you thinking about that?
Well, obviously it's unfortunate, but the Ravens at the time, their coach, came out and said we have zero tolerance, kind of responding to, the Browns kind of, why did they ever even take Watson? Because, we wouldn't put up with any of that. We have zero tolerance. We'll see what they do now. But I will say this, Greg, I have heard hardly anything about that. Maybe it's because I'm not in Baltimore, but in Cleveland, that's all we heard, and that's all we heard from national media. We had beat writers quit the job over it. We had a lot of people that cover the team, even somebody at the OBR, one of our prominent, quit over that. Wow. I mean, and what I'm saying is just like there's two sides to every story, but it was all done with Watson convicted no matter what, no matter what was said because of the sheer numbers.
Yes.
Okay. It came out about 21 at the time. I think it ended up 23 or 24. I mean, Tucker's at 16. Where's the number, as far as to believe? Yeah. So, I mean, I really, he's a kicker, but he was the face over there, very
they love him there.
And, and so forth. I have to think that was looming over his head. Might've been some of the reason he had a fall off in play. Yeah. That also is why I think Deshaun Watson had a fall off in play from 2020 to when he came to the Browns, weighing on him. But, I don't want to go back into old history with Watson, but no. I talked to somebody who was like very, very close to the situation, and it wasn't all that it was depicted there, the accusers and stuff. But, it is unfortunate all the way around, but I just feel like it has been a double standard. I don't know if it's just because he's not a quarterback or what, but I don't hear hardly anything about it compared to what Deshaun Watson, we were pounded with that. And I was on shows like this across the country, and it was almost like I was supposed to be defending him or something, It was like, no, sorry, the Browns got him, and, I'm on here to talk about it. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how this, but I expect the NFL came down hard on Watson. I mean, the arbitrator that they hired said 6-game suspension, and they said, well, that's not good enough. And they made it 11 games. So I don't know what they'll do with him. 11 games for a kicker. I would think he would be done, when you're 36 years old, but
yeah, Tony Lombardi, who helps cover the Ravens for us, he believes that Tucker will not kick again for the Ravens. So we'll see how that works out. And I think part of it is, and I know as a Jet fan, because I know what we go through as fans with the Jets is like a double standard as well. When you have a franchise that is constantly losing and bad things happen, the media just jumps all over them. But if it's the New England Patriots or the Baltimore Ravens or the Pittsburgh Steelers, it's, we'll give them a little bit, but it's that's the gold standard. We're not going to get it. We're not going to go into it too hard. They don't deserve it as much as the little guys that just can't seem to get it right, like the Browns and the Jets. So I know how that feels, and I do think it's a double standard. So not just because it's kicker or quarterback. So.
Yeah, and that's to your point. You're trying to turn things. I mean, I don't fault them for going. I mean, it was about this time in 2022 when they made that trade. And just like right now, when you look, you're trying to get a quarterback. You're not sure about the draft. Free agents. I can see when you have a 3-time Pro Bowler and NFL passing leader, you think you're getting a Patrick Mahomes type player, and you give up whatever you had to, and they did. plus all the money. And it totally was a complete swing and a miss. But what are you going to do? You're going to keep, running out the same thing year after year. And so I asked Andrew Berry at the combine, I said, I know you went all in and obviously what you did to get the quarterback. Would you do the same thing? Look at every possible and move mountains to get a franchise quarterback, in your opinion? And he said, we will. I mean, that is how we're looking at it. We're not going to be debtored. We have the cap and the money, the way we structure things, to do it. And I've said that before, because Jimmy Haslam is willing to pay the cash up front, just like they would give Watson $46 million right now. And he hasn't done anything to restructure. I think they will go in free agency, and especially with the Myles Garrett demands, to try to show that they can put this thing back on track quick. And that starts at quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, I had a conversation with RJ Ochoa, who covers the Cowboys for us, and I was trying to understand what was going on with the Dallas Cowboys and Jerry Jones, and why aren't they spending money in free agency? And he brought up, I think, which was a pretty good point, that is that, look, you have to have money available a lot of times, and if not, and if all your money is tied into this, that, or the other thing, not that you can't do it, but it's, it's just, you're a businessman, and that's what Jerry Jones is. He feels that I've got the top team in all of sports value wise, and I think I'm doing a pretty good job. Yeah, we're not winning games, but I think we're doing a pretty good job. So everybody rips Haslam for all of the Watson and a lot of other maybe bad decisions, but you can't blame him for being the type of guy that is willing to take his own money and just give it up at any cost in order to try and build a winner. It may not be working right now, but I don't think, that's an owner that I think that a lot of other teams would like to have.
Oh yeah. And, and that's what people, I don't claim to understand the salary cap, but we have a guy on our staff that's really good at it. He's in step every time. He's right on the money. He's called he said the Browns can have $89 million in cap space for free agency by doing these restructures. And the key is because Jimmy Haslam will pay the cash up front. The players still get their money. In fact, they get it up front. So Deshaun Watson gets a check for $46 million, say today. Well, he's happy.
Yes.
Well, that's the key. And some owners don't have the cash, to be able to do that up front. They haven't spent it properly. And that's what's been the best aspect of Andrew Berry, is that he has that behind him. If you look at the best move, I pointed out in 5 years of drafting, he's drafted 37 players. Only one made the Pro Bowl. But where he's been best is trades. He traded for Amari Cooper. He traded for Jerry Jeudy. He traded for Elijah Moore. The last 3 years, starting wide receivers. He was willing to take the money on for Amari Cooper. Gave up a 5th and 6th round pick. He was willing to take the money on for Jeudy and re-sign him to a big deal. And Moore was under a rookie contract, so he was willing to take it on for that. So I can identify a player that's pretty good, that's already, and if all I have to do is figure out how to pay him, that's how they're doing it. They took on Cooper's contract when Jones didn't want to pay it and restructured it. Same thing with Jeudy. And, so there's no magic science. Yeah. And so that's why I think, if Haslam said, I'm fed up, I'm not doing this anymore. Yeah. They would be cash strapped big time. And for the most part, the national media doesn't understand that. So I see the stories. Browns can't do anything. They're totally strapped because of Deshaun Watson. Well, they just showed you today. They just moved around it, and they're going to move around him. They're going to do what they need to do. They might not be, everything under the sun, but they can make moves, and I expect them to, especially, with the Myles Garrett thing. I think that they will turn over every rock they can. It doesn't mean they'll end up with anything.
Sure. And I would think that's good for free agents around the league, that they understand this and say, hey, that's an owner that if I'm looking for guaranteed cash, that's where I'm going to be able to get that there. a lot easier than anywhere else. And that's a good way to bring in free agents. So we'll see whether or not they can keep doing that, because again, this is a big offseason. The second pick, we can kind of start there. Nobody knows what Tennessee is going to do. And I know it's a very tough decision that they have to make. And the reason this is tough for Tennessee and Cleveland without quarterbacks is because they're in the unfortunate situation that it didn't happen last year. That'd be so easy. One's taking Williams, the other's taking Daniels. We're done with this. But the quarterback class this year is just not very good at the top. Now, you might be able to find some guys a little bit later on who I actually think might end up better than the guys in the first round. I know Howard didn't have a great combine. I don't think that matters. I still think he's going to be a good pro. There might be a few others there. But the point is that this is going to make things very interesting for Tennessee and Cleveland, because Carter and Hunter are better prospects, period, than the two quarterbacks. They just are. It's not even close between Sanders, Ward, Carter, and Hunter. But they're not quarterbacks, and Tennessee and Cleveland need them. So are Cleveland Browns fans nervous about this particular situation, or are they kind of all into, hey, we got the second pick, so no matter what, we're going to land one of these two quarterbacks? Are they kind of all into that, or do they see that, well, I don't know if these are the two quarterbacks that we want to be mortgaging our future on?
Well, I think a lot of people buy into the narrative that, okay, now Cam Ward is superior to Shedeur Sanders, and so there's really only one legitimate quarterback. But because of the premium at the quarterback position, we all know that they get drafted much higher. What it comes down to, the Browns' decision makers, is, do they have Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders or even Jackson Dart all about the same? If they do, you don't have to take one at number 2. But if you want one of them, you're going to have to probably take one or trade back up or something, and there's no guarantee. And so that's where, if you have Ward as the number 1 guy above Sanders or Dart or anybody, you take him, and you got to figure out how to take him. If Tennessee does something else, takes Carter, then you take him. But if you're at risk of losing him to a trade up, because the Giants or somebody else could go up to 1 if Tennessee's not taking Ward to get him. And so that's where I say it's not out of the question. If you believe he's the answer, you go from 2 to 1, because you have to solve this situation.
Sure.
Or you're going to continually, be in this situation. Same way with Sanders. If you think Ward and Sanders are about the same, then you just stay where you are and you're okay. But if you don't see Ward, Sanders, Dart, Milroe as difference makers that could be your guy at the top of the draft, then you don't take them. You don't just take them to take them. That's why I'm saying, and I've been proponing, I do a projection every week about where the Browns are. Nothing's really happened in the veteran. They need to go all in to either trade or sign a free agent quarterback to solve the problem.
Okay.
Whether that's Kirk Cousins, Sam Darnold, Derek Carr, Geno Smith, and there's been no clarity.
Yes, I agree.
But they have to get that solved.
Yes.
And that shouldn't preclude them, even if they get that guy, to not take Cam Ward if they believe he's the guy. Because whoever you get is probably a short-term fix, a year or two. I kind of agree with what the Falcons did last year. They went all in to get Kirk Cousins. Nobody can say not. I mean, they gave him a 4-year, $180 million at 36 years old with like $100 million guaranteed. And then they turned around and drafted Michael Penix with the 8th pick. That surprised everybody. But as it turned out, that gave them insurance. Now they can move on from Cousins, and they have their quarterback. I think the Browns should do the same thing, unless they can get somebody that's a little younger that they see as a longer-term answer. If for some way they got Derek Carr at 33 and they said, we got him for 3 or 4 years, then you can take Abdul Carter or somebody else, or Travis Hunter.
Would Darnold be the only guy that wouldn't be the case because he's still young?
That would be, yeah, the only free agent I see. But then again, Greg, at this time last year, nobody was wanting to get
No,
Sam Darnold. And is there a guy out there? Nobody knows. Is any of
sure.
these like Zach Wilsons and these guys that have been sitting around that were real high picks, would they all of a sudden explode? You don't know that.
You don't
So,
know. No one's
yeah,
gonna know.
even
Yeah.
Sam Darnold, was it the perfect storm?
Yep.
Are you going to get last year's or are you going to get going forward? Daniel Jones, all these guys have some characteristics, and it might be Russian roulette. Everybody trying to get a quarterback. You might be stuck with kind of a bridge guy like Jacoby Brissett, Joe Flacco, Jameis Winston, something like that.
And the
But
Browns fans are used to that. That's been
yeah,
going
I
on for far
mean,
too long. Yeah.
whoever starts opening day will be the 41st different starting quarterback. And there's only been one of the first 40 that's went somewhere else and did something. That was Baker. And Baker, to his credit, revived his career in Tampa. He didn't look like it was going that way when he went to Carolina or the Rams. But yeah, that's it. That's why it's been such a wasteland for quarterbacks here,
Yep.
is just not getting the fit, getting the right guy. And that's where I'm saying, even if you can get Cam Ward or Shadur Sanders or Jackson Dart or Jalen Milrow, if you got Kirk Cousins or somebody, even older, you have a base to let that guy learn and not throw him out there. I think when the Falcons switched to Penix, it was the right time. He got to watch a while.
And so that is all, even though DTR is on the roster. I don't know. I was never a believer in DTR as somebody that is going to be some sort of starting quarterback in the NFL. I thought maybe he could be a good backup, and that's about it. Do you think that even if the Browns go into, do you think that the focus could be what you're saying is they go out, they sign a, I mean, it sounds like it would make too much sense to do that. Sign your veteran, draft a quarterback. Even if you don't draft him at 2, maybe you draft him in the second round. You've got your veteran, you've got your young quarterback. Do they wind up also keeping DTR on the roster? And where do you think Jameis Winston might be headed?
I think DTR's best shot is, if he doesn't switch to wide receiver, if he stays at quarterback, I think maybe to be the third quarterback. Those of us that had to watch the Browns last season saw a noticeable difference when Jameis Winston took over. He set a franchise record, which is something to say, 497 yards. The problem was the interceptions. We all know that. The offense last year was a pass-happy offense, and you can never put Jameis Winston in a situation to throw the ball 40, 50 times a game. When he started and took over for Drew Brees after he retired, if you look back, the Saints started 5-2 with him at quarterback. He threw 14 touchdowns and 3 interceptions, and they were 5-2. I asked Jameis, why were you he tore his ACL in the 7th game. That was the last time he really started. I asked him why they were successful or why he was so successful in not throwing. He said, we had a great running game. They had Kamara and all that, and he wasn't asked to throw the ball 40, 50 times a game. He came to the Browns to play in Stefanski's offense, which he thought was going to be more of the pro style, look, and they switched it around for Watson, more of a pass first. So I really think the Browns are going to go back to the Stefanski type offense with a wide zone running game and play action pass and the run. I think they're going to try to go all in to build up the running backs room. And even Winston, I think, could do much better, but the Browns fans are kind of tainted because of the interceptions.
Yeah.
But, I don't know if Stefanski's ready to move on because of that too, or if they think, but there was noticeable when Watson went down, Winston, the offense was a different offense. They went back to DTR and it was right back to what it looked like under Watson. So there's a noticeable difference at quarterback. And I don't think DTR did anything to show, that he could really be successful. So they benched Winston. I don't know if it was just to keep him under wraps a little, or they were moving on from him one way or the other. But I wouldn't rule him out as a possibility to come back, especially with a draft pick. But I think they're going to try to do better if they can.
So so it's the longer this would be my guess. See if I'm on to the right thing here. So the longer they go in free agency and we don't see them adding a veteran quarterback, and let's say Jameson Winston's still out there, and the closer we get to the draft, that might be an indication that, maybe they are zeroing in on one of those top quarterbacks. And then maybe they would bring Winston back as the veteran free agent. That's something that the longer that goes, that might be what they're thinking.
Well, and even a guy like Jacoby Brissett, the first year of Watson, he was the bridge, played the first 11 games, and the offense looked pretty good under him. He's more of a standard, kind of a Kevin Stefanski type. I don't know if he'd want to come back again and be a mentor to somebody, but that will dictate. If they get a really good, in their mind, quarterback that they field's a couple year at least, then you can take more of a project guy. You could even take 2 young guys and they might have seen enough for DTR and say, let's take Cam Ward and Will Howard, later on, or if somebody drops, or they could just, and get the veteran. I wouldn't rule out Joe Flacco coming back. I mean, I know last year they didn't really even talk to him, his agent, but I think I have heard, a little bit that they have even talked with the agent and are more open to talking to him. So what I'm saying, I think they're going to have a lot of, because you can't control those things.
Yeah, you have to have a lot of different
They don't want to get caught empty-handed, because this ties back to Myles Garrett. Myles Garrett hurt the Browns badly when he said they're not in position to win. I want to move on. Well, what's that telling free agents?
Yeah.
And that's why one of the things they have to overpay to get somebody to come here. If they say, well, Greg, we'll give you $3 million, the other team gives you $3 million, you're going to choose the team that you feel has a better situation. So you might have to give you $3.5 million to get you to come there. So
didn't do the team any favors. No, not at all.
So that's what I see. I see either 2 new veterans and a rookie, or 1 veteran and 2 rookies, depending on what you get.
And I'm all for that. I think when you're in a situation like the Browns have been in for so long and they haven't found a quarterback, then the more young guys you can put in that room, the better. I don't think DTR is the answer. I like that scenario. Do something with the veteran, draft 2 guys, because there are guys later in the draft. You got guys like Dylan Gabriel, Seth Hennigan. I mean, there are other guys that are, there's even a few guys that are not even being talked about that I think are capable later round guys. And I know not everybody's Brock Purdy. We all get that. But those guys are out there and you just have to be good at it. Unfortunately, the Browns have not been, as you said, regarding the draft. So hopefully they'll get lucky this year. So let's stay on that. We know the top need is quarterback. Are the following needs just as evident, or is it kind of a mixed bag? And how would you rate them? If we start with quarterback number 1, how would you go down like 2, 3, 4, 5 with top needs?
Well, I don't want to scoop myself, but I will. I'm writing a series, 6 steps to get the Browns back to winning football and on the path. I did number 6 on Tuesday, safety. They released Juan Thornhill, and I won't go into much more. You can read that at theobr.com. Number 5 went yesterday, running back. I think the national media said, the Browns are moving on from Nick Chubb. I don't read it that way. I think they have such high respect for him that he only needs 400 yards to pass Leroy Kelly to be number 2 all time. 2 years out from that injury, I think he's worth bringing back. But you can't rely on that. And I could see them having a deal with him. Go get an offer and let us match it type of a thing.
Okay.
But you can't go into it counting on him. Jerome Ford, has been nice in his absence, but I don't look at him as a number 1 lead back. No. I think he could be number 2. But you could have a room of Chubb, Ford, and then go get one of these top running backs. Maybe not Ashton Genty with the 2nd pick, or Omarion Hampton, who probably be in the 1st round. But I like the 2 Buckeyes. I like Travion Henderson. I like Quinshon Judkins.
Yep.
There's 4 or 5 other ones that I think you could get in the 3rd, 4th round. They've never drafted a running back under Barry higher in the 5th round. That was Jerome Ford. Demetric Felton in the 6th round. So I think that they will draft a running back. They have 11 picks. So I think that type of a running back room gives you hope for the future as well as now. If Chubb comes back to close to the old Nick Chubb, you got a dynamic running back room. If he doesn't, then okay, you move on. You might even draft two of these guys.
Sure.
And today is defensive tackle. I feel like they need to get a big run stopper to go with, either upgrade Dalvin Tomlinson. But I think in the draft, it's a deep class with defensive tackles. And again, with all the picks, they could choose to get a future to go with Michael Hall. And they like Juwan Briggs, two guys they drafted last year. So I think they need to get younger. Right now, their starters are Dalvin Tomlinson and Shelby Harris, both in their 30s. And so I think run stopping, last year, they dropped from being the number one defense in the NFL in 23 to like 11th or 12th. And in the running, they were like 21st. So they got to get that figured out.
Okay.
Tomorrow, number 3 is going to be wide receiver. I think they need to get another top-end wide receiver. Elijah Moore, I think, is moving on unless they keep him as a 1 year, bring him back. But I don't think he's going to be a long-term. They got Jerry Jeudy. That was a home run. And Cedric Tillman they like a lot, but I don't know if you can count on him to be the number 2. He, had a concussion, missed the last 6 games. He had a concussion to finish the first year. So his 2 years, he's ended on injury reserve. So I think, again, they could draft one, but this is where Barry seems to go after guys in trades. Like I said, the last 3 years, he's traded for a wide receiver. And you've heard of Cooper Kupp, being on the block. You've heard of DK Metcalf. There's other guys that, that may not have been demanded trades like Amari Cooper, but they're in the final year of a contract and the team isn't going to sign them and they want to move on. And Andrew Berry's good at taking on contracts and restructuring and so forth. The top 2, edge rusher, I think, they could help solve that with Abdul Carter, regardless if Garrett, they move on from him or not. They've been looking for somebody to pair with Garrett. Wow. I think Carter would be a big-time move. But there's also a deep class in edge rushers. And there's some free agents as well. And, of course, the top one I've been talking about all day is quarterback. They're going to go all in. They have to try to solve that situation. I'll argue last year when they were 1-6, their season was over because they never substituted Deshaun Watson. They played him all 7 games. He had horrific numbers. If he would have just played average in those 7 games, they would have won 2 or 3 other games. Sure. Their season wouldn't have been over. When they were 1-6, everybody knew the season was over on the team. That's when the defense started falling off. Special teams, it just seemed like the team spiraled out of control and finished 3-14. You get average to above average quarterback play. This roster is not that bad. They may not make the playoffs, but they can win 7, 8, 9 games next year just by getting average quarterback play.
Yep, absolutely. There's still a lot of key players and even better ones that are around just a few years ago when they were a playoff team, and then a lot was expected the year after when Baker got hurt. So it hasn't been that long. And we've talked about this the last few years. This is one of the more underrated, top to bottom, solid, deep rosters. There's a lot of talent here. And it's just a matter of missing enough of those guys that you mentioned, those top tier guys. There's just not enough of those yet. And that's the draft is where you're supposed to get them. Can't rely on free agency to get them or trades, even though he's done a really good job with trades. But overall, this has got to be 11 picks. This has got to be that year that Barry looks back and goes, that was the year. That was the year that we changed everything and we hit on draft picks. Because I got to believe that if it doesn't happen, say this offseason, and then let's say in about a year, let's say they pick the wrong quarterback again and things don't go well, then it's probably time for a change in the front office again. Wouldn't you think? I mean, what kind of leash is the front office on coaching staff, general manager, and all that?
Well, they really like the pair of Stefanski and Barry, but you can make a case for them, but you could make a case for both of them. I already said Barry, one Pro Bowler in 37 draft picks. Now, granted, they didn't have 3 first rounds the last 3 years.
Yeah, that's
Why?
true.
Because
Yes.
Andrew Berry traded him for Deshaun Watson. And one thing on a trade, I don't think Andrew Berry wants to go down in history as the guy who traded for Deshaun Watson and traded away Myles Garrett. So the Kevin Stefanski, they led the league in turnovers. They led the league in pre-snap penalties. And a lot of people say, well, that's coaching. How many times does a 3-14 coach in the NFL get a do-over? And they're giving both these guys do-over. So that's also why I don't think they're trying to rebuild, is because, first off, in the NFL, you don't have to. Jaden Daniels showed you what you can do. They went from 4-13 to, the NFC second round just with quarterback play. I don't know if anybody saw that coming. Yeah. So they are, even though they both got an extension last year, they're not going to be around to see it if they're in a rebuild, unless Jimmy Haslam said, hey, do what you got to do, trade away Garrett and totally rebuild, and I'm with you.
Yeah.
I don't think that's in the card. So
I don't think so either.
Yeah, I think they're really under the gun. And not only do they have 11 picks, they have 4 in the top 103. So those are players that should be able to contribute quickly. You got to get, like I said, a blue chip player in that top 5. You got to take the best player and quarterback trumps it. But I don't totally agree with trading down and getting a bunch of picks, because they had the number 2. They had the number 2 pick the year, and they traded it to the Eagles, and they took Carson Wentz. The Browns got like 5 or 6 picks. You couldn't even remember the guys they got. Corey Coleman, Sean Coleman. They got 5 or 6 guys that didn't even play in the NFL. Everybody wants to trade for a lot of picks. It's who you get with them that matters. Yeah. And so there's some uncertainty or distrust with even the draft here. Do you trust Andrew Berry to get it right, in the draft? Because I thought maybe they would make a move, because it is but they put all their eggs, in doing that. So they got to get it right. You can't just take swings, and you got to get it right in the draft, because that's really where you build your team. So we'll see what happens. But like you said, you have ammo with 11 picks. I don't expect them to use all 11 picks. Use some of them to move up in rounds to get impact player at tight end, at running back, at defensive end, at any of a number. And another big question is JOK. I'm getting the feeling that he might not even play this year. And that could be what led into Myles Garrett's demand, knowing that your second best defensive player might not play, or third best player. I don't know that for a fact, but the Browns are not giving any information other than they're hopeful. So that's an area you'd have to address. He's the one out of 37 that made the Pro Bowl as well in draft picks.
That's bad luck. Yep. That's not good. But I agree with all that. Trade up, you got the ammo, get the better players. You have the talent. We just talked about it. There's enough talent. There's enough of the later round talent on this team. The team now needs some premium guys. Before we close up, my opinion is I think the Browns should go ahead and draft Carter. If Tennessee goes with Hunter, which I think they probably do, take Carter. I think you match him with Garrett, and that'd be awesome. Sign one of those quarterbacks. Take one of the quarterbacks in round 2. Do it that way. That's just my opinion. I think they're better off that way. I agree that you can get a really good running back as well. You can get a really good defensive tackle in this class. So I think they can do a lot of good, but it all starts with that first pick. Wills, is he gone? You're muted, Fred. Somehow you got muted. There you are.
He played out his 5 years. Last year was the year for him to really solidify to get that second contract, and he didn't play like hardly the whole year. He came back, played 3 games or a few games, and then went back on injury reserve. Unless he wants to come back to be like a swing tackle. DeJuan Jones took his place, and they're going to go forward with him at left tackle. They might bring in a veteran to compete with him, but I think Wills, is gone. I think they have already moved past him and DeJuan Jones. You can't count on him.
No,
He was never ready, and it was
no.
like he didn't seem to be motivated to want to play. You would have thought you had a big contract in front of you. You would have done whether he didn't attack the rehab. I mean, he didn't have the major injury surgery that some other people have had, and he wasn't ready, to start the season. Everybody thought he would be, and then he really was never right all year. So no, I would be very surprised if he didn't return unless he has no other offers but a 1-year come back to the Browns for comfort.
Oh, the NFL, they're dying for tackles and offense.
Yeah.
Somebody will give them a deal. You know that. It's they'll take a chance. Okay. What about some of these other guys? Akins, do you think he's going to return? Let's see. Hines, what's the deal with him? Hines and Foreman.
Well, they were on 1-year deals. Hines never came off the non-football injury. I thought maybe his contract would toll, but then they released him, so that meant that his contract must have tolled, but they didn't.
Okay.
They could come back with him, but there was something there. He practiced for 3 weeks and they just didn't activate him. That's 3 years in a row they've signed a return man. They got injured and didn't play the whole year. So Akins, I think he could be in play to come back on a 1-year deal as the backup. He did a pretty good job in filling in when Njoku was injured. Yeah. But I think they're going to dress tight end in the draft. They haven't done so in a couple years. So there's, a lot of – where the Browns have needs seems to be a lot of depth at positions. And yes. I think at tight end would make sense to get a rookie for 4 or 5 years. Because last year when Njoku was hurt, Akins wasn't really a blocker. He was more of a pass catcher. And they need somebody like Harrison Bryant filled that role. And they need somebody that can do both things.
Okay.
And I think, a 4th, 5th, 6th round tight end, maybe higher, could be a guy that, is how they address it.
Okay. And as far as potential cap casualties, do you think of, is there anybody that sticks out? I was just looking over the salaries. The only guys that are making a little bit of money that haven't exactly been playing up to par would be Emerson, Alex Wright, of course, the injury. Ford's making a nice contract for mainly a special teams guy, corner. So any of those guys, or is there someone else that might be in trouble cap casualty wise?
Well, Thornhill, they moved on from to save him like $7 million. I would say some depends on free agency. If they could get Javon Hargrave, who they went really hard at a couple years ago, and he ended up with the 49ers, they settled for Dalvin Tomlinson. They could move on from Tomlinson if they feel like an upgrade there, or they could keep them both. Okay. It just depends on what they do in free agency. Okay. The draft, they could move on. They could try to trade Greg Newsome, but I don't know if they get any takers. There's several positions, but I think they'll try to upgrade before they move on right now. Wyatt Teller's one that people thought. But going back to the wide zone, I think that with Joe Bitonio returning and Jack Conklin and Teller had his best years in that Bill Callahan, that wide zone, I think they feel like that's the way to go. Now, Ethan Posick, I think he's got a $6 million not guaranteed. If they feel like they can get a center, for less on free agency, or they could draft one. They have Luke Whippler, who missed all last year, but they drafted him kind of being to the long-term answer at center. So I don't know what they think there, but I would think Posick might be the most vulnerable on the offensive line. But we'll see what happens.
All right. And are there any, by the way, are there any top coaching changes from the staff?
Well, I mean, they moved on from the offensive coordinator on down. I mean, they got rid of Ken Dorsey and and Andy Dickerson, the offensive line coach. They promoted Tommy Rees, who used to be the offensive coordinator at Alabama, played at Notre Dame, and they moved Mike Bloomgren, brought him in as the offensive line coach. He is former Rice head coach, and he was on the staff with Bill Callahan for many years. So he is a proponent of the wide zone. That's what I was saying that they're going to go back to. So those are the most notable changes. Defense is pretty much intact. They had some adjustments, but is mostly on the offensive side.
Okay. And of course, Stefanski's still going to run the offense, though, right? And as you mentioned, that's the whole idea, is that they're going back to those concepts, and he's going to be in full control of the offense again.
Well, he went back to calling plays, he said, at least for now. I asked him at the combine, back to the quarterback, why don't you demand or pound the table to get the quarterback that you want, whether it's a free agent or in the draft? Get a guy. I don't think Deshaun Watson was a type of quarterback. It was obvious. He changed everything last year. But he said, well, we do it all as a group. And whether that's true or not, I don't know. But you've been here now 6 years. Your job's on the line. Why wouldn't you just say, this is who I want, this would work?
Yeah.
So that could be the case. But, he's going to call the plays. Looks like they're going back to his style, and we'll see. I mean, I think if you play great defense, get the defense fixed back to what it was in 2023. If you can just get stable quarterback play, you can have a chance to play winning football.
Before I let you go, Fred, you mentioned Weipler at center. Are there any other young players that haven't really played much or played a little bit that fans need to know could possibly vie for more competition like Weipler? Are there any other guys out there on the roster?
Well, Zach Zinner, they drafted in the 3rd round out of Michigan last year, played a little early, didn't do that great, but I still have to think that draft him in the 3rd round, they have to feel like he could step in at any time for Teller or Batonio or be the heir apparent to one of them. As far as, Jamari Thrash didn't show a whole lot. He played a little bit, but he could be a guy that could play more next year. Winston Reed was an undrafted linebacker, played pretty well, and depending on JOK's future, Mohamed Diabate and Nathaniel Watson, could play big roles at linebacker. Michael Hall played well. Jawan Briggs, he was a 7th round pick towards the end of the year. They put him in to see what he could do, and he played pretty well. And Isaiah McGuire, don't look now, but in the playing time he had, he was rated as one of the top run defenders at edge in the NFL. And, I think that he would probably be the starter right now. They could move on from Okoronkwo as well, depending on what they do in the offseason here.
Okay. All right. Well, Fred, you've given us a lot of time, and we always appreciate that. I know, especially at this time of year, things are real busy, but we are going to, as I said before, we're going to have links in the description of this video so you can check out where Fred is, other podcasts, articles, things of that nature. And we'll be back talking hopefully after the draft, unless something happens, some blockbuster move, which we don't think will happen before the draft. But either way, I look forward to talking to you when this offseason is over, so we can start to get an early look ahead at the next season, Fred. So once again, thanks for doing this.
All right, Greg, thanks.
You got it. And we'll see you Browns fans again whenever Fred is on here on the Arledge Football Network, and we'll see everybody again here real soon.